It was 10 in the morning on a Thursday in June. Children in neat school uniforms were sitting at their desks, just like every other day. Parents had already dropped them off. Teachers were working through the morning lessons. The school was the kind of institution families aspired to send their children to, attached to Osaka Kyoiku University, one of the most prestigious elementary schools in the region. By 10:20 a.m., 8 of those children were dead. 7 were girls. 1 was a 7-year-old boy, and the man who killed them had bought the knife less than an hour before. This is the Osaka Ikeda School Massacre, Japan's deadliest school attack in recorded history. June 8, 2001, a Thursday morning in Ikeda, a quiet residential city just north of Osaka. At around 10 in the morning, a 37-year-old man named Mamoru Takuma walked into a knife shop near the school. He picked up a deba knife, the heavy single-edged blade that Japanese cooks use for breaking down fish. With a 15.8-centimeter blade, he paid $7,480 for it. Then he drove to Ikeda Elementary School, more formally the Osaka Kyoiku University attached Ikeda Elementary School, and parked his car in front of the east gate. What happened next lasted approximately 10 minutes. Takuma climbed through a window into the school's south building. He moved quickly. He entered a second-grade classroom and stabbed 5 children before any adult could physically stop him. A first-grade teacher was stabbed in the back as she tried to intervene. He moved through 2 more second-grade classrooms, killing 2 more students. Then he ran into a first-grade classroom where he stabbed a 7-year-old boy to death. By around 10:20 a.m., the school's vice principal and a teacher had physically wrestled Takuma to the ground and held him until police arrived. The attack was over. 8 children were dead. 7 of them were 8-year-old girls. The 8th was that 7-year-old boy. 15 other children were seriously wounded. 2 teachers had also been stabbed. Takuma was arrested on the spot. He didn't try to run. He had planned it that way. On the morning of June 8, 2001, Mamoru Takuma had a court hearing scheduled. The hearing was for an assault charge from 8 months earlier, when he'd attacked a hotel bellhop while working as a taxi driver in Osaka. It wasn't a serious charge, but Takuma wasn't going to that hearing. He had already decided what he was going to do instead. It's reported that Takuma had developed a specific, bitter resentment toward the school and the families associated with it. Ikeda Elementary was part of Osaka Kyoiku University's attached campus, meaning the children there came largely from educated, middle-class households. Takuma had spent years moving through part-time jobs, getting fired for erratic behavior, watching his life go nowhere. It's said he came to hate what that school represented, the comfortable, successful world he felt entirely shut out of. This isn't confirmed in any official court finding as a primary cause, but it appears in accounts of what he told investigators. He also reportedly cased the school in the weeks before the attack. He knew the layout. He knew where the classrooms were. The morning of June 8th, he bought the knife, drove to the school and climbed through a window. The school, like virtually every elementary school in Japan at the time, had no security guard. There were no metal detectors. The gates were open. No one stopped him because no one had any reason to believe they needed to. He moved through 3 classrooms in roughly 10 minutes. He didn't speak to the children, he made no demands and gave no warning. He just stabbed, repeatedly, rapidly, without apparent selection. When teachers tried to intervene, he stabbed them too. What ended the attack wasn't a security system. It was the physical courage of a vice principal and a teacher. 2 adults who tackled a man with a knife and held him down. Both were injured doing it. Mamoru Takuma said very plainly why he did it. "I've become disgusted with everything," he told investigators after his arrest. "I've tried to kill myself several times, but couldn't. I wanted to be caught and be given a death sentence." Read that again. He killed 8 children because he wanted the state to execute him, and he had concluded he couldn't take his own life. The massacre wasn't a fit of rage. It wasn't a targeted political act. It was, in the most disturbing sense, a calculated plan for state-assisted suicide. Using 8-year-old children as the mechanism. To understand how a person arrives at that place, you have to go back. Mamoru Takuma was born in November 1963 in Itami, Hyogo Prefecture. The warning signs were early and severe. At age 3, it's said he rode his tricycle into the flow of traffic on a highway, causing a pileup. As a child, he reportedly killed small animals by wrapping them in newspaper and lighting them on fire. In high school, he attacked a teacher, then ran away from home for months. When he returned, he got into a physical confrontation with his father. His father tried to have him admitted to a psychiatric hospital, but the hospital reportedly turned them away. His father eventually disowned him. In 1981, Housei, at 18, Takuma enlisted in the Japan Air Self-Defense Force. He had hoped to become a pilot. His eyesight wasn't good enough, and he was assigned to aircraft maintenance instead. In January 1983, he was discharged after bringing a teenage runaway onto base. In November 1984, he raped a woman while collecting rent for a property management company and was sentenced to 3 years in prison. After his release in 1989, he moved to the Osaka area. He worked part-time, as a driver, a janitor, a laborer, and was repeatedly let go for erratic behavior. He married 4 times. By 2001, he had been arrested at least 11 times across his adult life. In 1999, he was working as a janitor at a different elementary school, Itami City Ikejiri Elementary. He slipped some of his own prescription sedative medication into the teacher's communal tea. 4 staff members were hospitalized. He was detained in a psychiatric facility following that incident. In October 2000, he assaulted a hotel bellhop, the charge that would have brought him to court on June 8, 2001. On May the 23rd of that year, just 16 days before the massacre, he voluntarily checked himself into a psychiatric hospital for depression. He left the following day without completing any treatment. And on June the 8th, he chose the school. I want to be careful here because what follows is interpretation, not clinical diagnosis. But the psychological shape of this case is worth sitting with. Mamoru Takuma wasn't a man whose violence came suddenly or without context. He was a man whose entire life was, by any measure, a long chain of collapses, institutional, personal, and psychological. Multiple jobs, 4 marriages, repeated arrests, a history of violent and antisocial behavior stretching back to early childhood. And through it all, a deepening conviction, it seems, that the world had no place for him. What's striking about his stated motive is the complete absence of any plan to escape. He didn't try to get away. He wasn't looking to disappear. He wanted to be caught, to be seen committing something so severe that death was the only possible response. This pattern, which some investigators and commentators who examined the case have described as a form of suicide by proxy, describes a person who has concluded that they cannot end their own life and so engineers the state into doing it for them. The extreme nature of the crime, attacking small children, the category of victim that carries the absolute weight of social horror, may have been a deliberate choice. He needed to ensure the outcome. Court-appointed psychiatrists examined Takuma in August 2001, less than 3 months after the attack, and determined that he retained full criminal responsibility for his actions. His defense had argued he was temporarily insane at the time of the attack. The court rejected that argument. He had, at various points in his psychiatric history, carried a diagnosis of schizophrenia, but by the time of the trial that had been revised to paranoid personality disorder, a condition that does not, under Japanese law or psychiatric convention, excuse criminal responsibility in the way a psychotic episode might. So the court gave him exactly what he asked for. On August 28, 2003, the Osaka District Court sentenced Mamoru Takuma to death. He told his lawyers not to appeal. He withdrew any challenge to the sentence himself. The death penalty became final in September 2003, just over 2 years after the crime. He was executed by hanging at the Osaka Detention House on September 14, 2004. In Japanese terms, that timeline is extraordinary. Japan's death row typically holds people for years, often decades, as appeals wind through the courts. Takuma had asked to be killed quickly. The system, in this case, obliged. What the Ikeda massacre left behind in Japan is layered and still felt today. On the practical side, June 8, 2001 ended the era of the open Japanese school. Before that morning, virtually no elementary school in Japan employed a security guard. Within months, that changed. The education minister called for security guards at schools nationwide. Teachers were enrolled in self-defense training and issued equipment like tear gas canisters and alarm devices. Local governments began stationing former police officers near school gates. Ikeda Elementary School itself was the first in the country to hire a dedicated security guard, something the principal at the time described as an unheard-of step. The school also had to be extensively renovated, partly to address the psychological weight of what had happened inside its walls. Some of the surviving children, teachers and parents developed post-traumatic stress disorder. For many of them, the effects lasted years. There were also policy discussions and proposed legislation around preventive psychiatric detention for people deemed dangerous to others, though those proposals were contentious and their outcomes complicated. Every June 8th, a memorial is held for the 8 children killed that morning. In 2025, 24 years later, survivors, now adults in their 30s, still gathered at the school. Some came with their own children. One of the children killed was named Rina Yamashita. She had won an essay contest sometime before the attack, writing about her admiration for the J-pop singer Hikaru Utada and her dream of becoming a singer one day. After the massacre, Utada released a rearrangement of her song Distance, renamed Final Distance, as a tribute to Reina and to the other victims of the attack. It was released in July 2001, just weeks after the crime. Reina Yamashita was a second grader. She was 8 years old. Here's what I keep coming back to. Mamoru Takuma didn't snap. There wasn't a single moment where a stable person became a killer. There was a man who, over the course of decades, gave clear, repeated signals to family members, to employers, to psychiatric facilities, to the criminal justice system, that he was not only troubled but capable of catastrophic violence. Each time, the signal was received and then released. His father was turned away from a psychiatric hospital. The hospital that treated him after the 1999 school poisoning released him. He checked himself into a psychiatric ward 16 days before the massacre and walked out the next morning. A court date was set for the very morning he chose to commit the attack. None of this makes any single institution or individual the villain. Crisis intervention is genuinely hard, and the information was scattered, not consolidated. But it does mean something. A man spent years telling the world, in the clearest terms he knew, what he was becoming. And the systems around him weren't built to hear it all at once. The 8 children killed that morning were 7 and 8 years old. They were at school. That should be the safest place there is. That ought to be enough of a reason for any system to get better at noticing. Thanks for watching. If this story stayed with you, subscribe and come back, because understanding why these things happen is how we start to prevent the next one.